Well, Razorback fans, we're getting closer and closer to Razorback football season, less than a week away. And the defensive talk got people talking yesterday about the Razorback defense will it ever be elite at Arkansas. Well, let's talk about it in today's Locked On Razorbacks podcast.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. I am your host, John Neighbors. I'm also the host of Inside Arkansas Live, which you can catch every weekday starting at noon on Inside Arkansas and InsideArkansas.com. Ultimate College Football HC is a brand new mobile game that is completely free, has no ads, and 100% playable offline. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Begin your coaching legacy today. Hope everybody's having a wonderful Friday. You finally made it to the weekend. Actually got some college football games coming up this weekend, week 0, which I've always laughed. Some people have a problem with week 0 because they're like, why don't they just start at week 1? Well, it doesn't feel like a full college football season, so it makes sense to be week 0. But still, Arkansas, 6 days away. 6 days away from actually having Razorback football take place. Of course, we'll talk about that later. But I wanted to start and discuss this from yesterday because Travis Williams, when we met with him and he gave some really interesting quotes and everything, it was really fascinating. And I thought, for many reasons, it was very interesting. But one of the things, though, that I was actually discussing with somebody was about the defense and, will it improve and everything. And one thing that they said to me that really stood out is they go, I just wish for once Arkansas would have an elite defense. I feel like it's been so long since we've had an elite defense. And I was looking at it and I'm like, it has been a long time. In fact, in my opinion, the last time Arkansas had a, quote, elite defense was in 2014. I reference that a lot, but that was the last time where you felt like your defense, it wasn't just, a bunch of nonsense or bend and not break. I mean, you shut out 2 SEC opponents back-to-back games. I know back then, you went 6-6, so it doesn't really get remembered fondly, but beating LSU 17-0, then beating Ole Miss 30-0, folks, I don't care who you are. I don't care what team you are. I do not care. If you're able to shut out an SEC opponent, even if it's Vanderbilt or whoever, that's impressive. If you do it in back-to-back weeks, it's extremely impressive. And when you do it against ranked opponents like LSU and Ole Miss were that year, it's incredibly rare. In fact, I don't even think it's happened since then, in the SEC at least, that team's done that. So that's how, if anyone asks, what made that defense so elite to you? Well, that right there's the example. But also, it's about personnel. It's about the teams you go up against. It's about how you do it, how you approach it, who's the coach, everything like that. And I remember at the time, I thought coordinators and coaches mattered so much, which they do. I'm not saying they don't. But I remember thinking, I was like, man, Rob Smith, who was the defensive coordinator back then, it's like, that dude is just, he's got to be one of the greatest defensive minds in the country. To walk into Arkansas and have this level of defense and putting this level of defense together, this guy knows his stuff. Like, he's going to become a big-time defense coordinator one day. And I would say that he's done a fairly good job. I have no idea where he's at even right now. I probably should have looked that up. But he didn't become this elite-level defense coordinator that's coaching at, Michigan or coaching at Alabama or coaching at LSU or Georgia or anything like that, and didn't become a major head coach like I thought he would. And I look back on that, and it's so funny because I put so much stock into the coordinator and who it is. I didn't put enough stock into the players. And that is what made that defense so amazing. And that's what makes any defense so amazing. Players, dudes, NFL caliber guys who are, 1, healthy, 2, put in a good position to be successful, and 3, play alongside other pros. Now, here's what I mean by that. Arkansas defensively has had some pretty good players make it into the NFL. In fact, surprisingly enough, some of them are secondary players, like Cameron Curl has made quite an NFL stay. But one of the great examples, best example probably, is Dre Greenlaw. Dude is an incredible linebacker for the 49ers who, was somewhat recruited coming out of high school, but really blossomed and has become a bona fide NFL stud. So he's incredible. And you have a few others here and there, guys on the defensive line, Dietrich Wise and all that. But my point is, and why I'm bringing that up, is because if you go back to that team in 2014, you had NFL players, multiple NFL players, and you had multiple NFL players at different positions, different position groups. Now, the defensive line, as it always gets talked about, is where it starts, and there was no doubt about it that the defense for that 2014 year was based so much on the success of that D-line. Because you had Trey Flowers, who, I know people argue it, but Trey Flowers to me was one of the greatest Razorback defensive linemen of all time. He played in the NFL and had a good run in the NFL and played for the Patriots, of course, and thinking the Lions. Dealt with some injuries, but you'd be hard-pressed to find a more dominant, a more game-changing defensive lineman, especially defensive end, than Trey Flowers was. The guy was amazing. So it started there. So you had him. Well, then you also had a guy named Darius Philon, who Darius Philon played in the NFL for a good bit. And he was also an absolute beast. And people may forget this about Darius Philon. Darius Philon came to Arkansas originally when he was committed to Alabama. And Alabama, from my understanding, in the final hour of signing day or whatever, basically said, hey, we're going to, I think was it gray shirt, I think at the time, or blue shirt? It was basically where it was like, hey, we still want you to come play for us, but we're not going to be able to honor you with a scholarship. We want you to walk on with us and then, maybe develop into a scholarship. Well, he wasn't having that. And so at the last minute, he switched his commitment and came to Arkansas. And that was during the John L. Smith year, ironically enough. Well, I know Petrino's the one that did it, but still you had him. You also had a guy named Dietrich Wise, who was a young player at the time, but plays in the NFL still to this day and is really good. And then you had a Martrell Spate, who Martrell Spate in the NFL, I wouldn't say made it big time, but college-wise, he was a really, really good college football player. JUCO guy that comes in, develops, and is just really smart and is able to take advantage and do some great things with the plays that are basically put in front of him because of the greatness of that defensive line. And then you had a guy like Tevin Mitchell, who's a senior. Now, Tevin Mitchell played in the NFL for a while, dealt with some injury, couldn't really play the cornerback position, but when they figured it out and put him at that nickel spot, it really made him flourish and open up. And those are guys that just played in the NFL. And then from everywhere else, you had some really good college players. I believe Jared Collins was on that team. And, you had an Alan Turner at safety, who was just a guy who was able to guide and be a leader on that team. You had Braylon Mitchell, who I thought was an underrated quarterback. Brooks Ellis, who was a really solid linebackers, not quarterback. Those guys, linebackers. You had good players, is what I'm breaking it all down to and coming down to. Now, I think Rob Smith deserves some credit, so I'm not trying to take everything away from him, but that defense was going to be amazing if Travis Williams coached them, if Barry Odom coached them. Like, they just had guys. And if you look at the best defenses in the country in college football year in and year out, who are they? It's the Georgias of the world, Michigans, Ohio States, Alabama, which I know they kind of took a step back, but still, for the most part, is always Alabama. And what do those teams have in common? They recruit at the highest level. They get the best players. So I say all that in a roundabout way to come back and say it this way. Will the Razorbacks ever have an elite defense again? I believe they will. I believe it is possible. And how I justify elite, by the way, is being one of the top 5 defenses in the SEC. If you're a top 5 defense in the SEC overall, you're an elite defense. And I think Arkansas can get to that. But just like in 2014, no one expected that defense to do what they did. You remember that? Like going into 2014, you were riding this losing streak. And you look back at those scores, folks, like the season started rough because they opened up the year on the road against Auburn, which was bull crap. But that was the same year that Arkansas lost to Alabama 14-13. They shut out LSU and Ole Miss, as I mentioned. They went up on the road against Dak Prescott, the number one team, Mississippi State Bulldogs that year, and lost the game 17-10. Like, they were a dominant defense against really good teams. No one expected that. And now you go back and you look at it in a different light. And you can say it's fortunately or unfortunately, but the way that Razorback defense is going to be back to something like that is, one, they got to have the players. And it has to be multiple. I'm talking about at minimum 5. Half of your defense, starter-wise, needs to be bona fide NFL players. Guys that'll get drafted or guys that'll at least play multiple years in the NFL. I don't even care if it's backup in the NFL, but an NFL player. You got to have at least half of those guys. And then you also have to be able to stay healthy, of always, but also have a right coach, a right coordinator, a right group that puts people in position to be successful. 4-3, 3-4, 3-3-5, 4-2-6, 4-2-5, 3-2-6, whatever defenses you want to run. Like, that's all about strengths. And that's all about, what you got and what you're working with. But it's about finding where those guys fit in, how they fit in, and how you can be successful with them. You do that, you make that work. I believe Arkansas can have an elite defense once again. It's not impossible. It's much easier to have a better offense, as we've seen, than defense. But I think Arkansas will get there one day. I really do. Would be nice. Would be nice. Who knows? Maybe it's this year. Couldn't tell you. We're going to take a break, but I want to tell you something about the season opener in a second, too. It's a Thursday night game. We'll talk about that. So stay with us here on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. All right, Razorback fans. I know you're all fans, of course, of the Locked On Razorbacks. It's your favorite podcast, right? The best Razorback podcast in the world. Of course it is. But I want to take a moment to give you a heads up on the brand new mobile game that I think you're going to love as much as I do. It's the Ultimate College Football HC. In this amazing game and simulation, you get to step into the shoes of a head coach and lead your college football program to glory. Can you imagine actually being the head coach of the Razorbacks? Some of you have. I know I have. Some of you act like you are, or at least wish you were, with the way that you are so negative sometimes about calls. But either way, from recruiting players and hiring coaches to overseeing training camps and handling school scholarships, you control every crucial detail of your program. It's all in your hands. Will you be able to handle the pressure? It's the ultimate question. And here's what I really love about the game. You're responsible for calling offensive plays during the games, and your strategy will not only determine the success of your football season, but will shape the future of the legacy of your program. Ultimate College Football HC is completely free, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline. You can play on the go as you want and when you want to. And of course, we have a special offer for you, all you Locked On Razorback fans. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store and receive a free boost to your program. Make sure that you take advantage of this perk, as it will get your team off to a very strong start. So download the game today by visiting ultimate-cfb.com or look it up on the app stores. It's Ultimate College Football HC. Begin your coaching legacy today. All right, so moving on into the next segment of the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. So I mentioned that we are less than a week away. And I will say it's weird whenever I say that and it's during the week. College football is meant to be played on Saturdays. That's how it is. NFL gets Sunday, college football gets Saturday. And that is one of the biggest things, one of the biggest reasons why I get so frustrated and I'm probably going to complain about this again once college football season starts to come to an end, the championship's going on. I have felt that college football in the national championship game, it doesn't need to be played on a Monday night. It needs to be played on a Saturday. Like, I get for television ratings, I get, no, going up against NFL. Like, I don't care, though. Watching a national championship in football on a Monday night, just because no games of note are ever on a Monday night, it feels awkward and weird. And then people are going to be like, well, college basketball's on a Monday. Yeah, but college basketball also gets played. Every team plays on random days all the time. Like Arkansas in the SEC, you're going to play on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, or you're going to play on a Saturday every time. And sometimes during the non-conference, you play on a Thursday or you play on a Monday. And some teams play on Sunday. So it's like, it's a lot different there. There's not like one day where it's like, hey, this is the day for this sport. College football has it. This is the day of this sport. Well, for the Razorbacks in their opening game, they're not playing on that day. They're playing on Thursday. Now, this was announced way back when that it was going to be moving to Thursday. And I even asked this question on Inside Arkansas Live as a poll question just to see what people thought about the game moving to the Thursday night. Because I wanted to see what the fans do. I know how I feel, but I wanted to see how the fans felt. And it was a close voting, I'd say, but the majority of people were fine and actually happy with it being on a Thursday. And I'm going to tell you why it's great, why it's awesome that this game is on a Thursday. Because, one, it's against UAPB in Little Rock, and I'm not hating on UAPB or insulting them. I'm not insulting or hating on War Memorial in Little Rock because I don't want to go down that road. It's been talked about way too many times. What I'm saying is that it's a game, though, that if you're going to do something like that, it's the perfect game to do so. Because do you all remember last year on the first game of the year and how hot it was in War Memorial? They were supposed to be at 3 and they moved it up to noon, and then it was just a disaster. Absolute disaster. And I don't care, like, if you run out of water, if the ticket machines break down, all that stuff happens. And no one wants it, but it happens. But what makes it exponentially 20 billion times worse is when it's so sweltering hot that you're just melting out there. That's going to make anything in life worse. And that's what everyone got, unfortunately, during that time, was that nonsense that they had to deal with. And so I have just looked at it where, hey, it's a night game on a Thursday night, which you could do it on a Saturday night, but it's a night game on a Thursday night. It's going to be cooler. It's probably still be very warm, but it's going to be cooler. People can make arrangements, and it's been changed long enough that people can make arrangements. But also, here's the biggest thing for me. It's Labor Day weekend. And I don't know about y'all, but I would rather have my Labor Day weekend, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, be laid out to where it's like, oh, this is perfect. I get to just watch college football all day long. I don't have to go to the game. I don't have to worry about being in the heat forever. I don't have to worry about, it's just for me personally, but like doing all the work and stuff around it. It's kind of just like sit back and you get truly a 3-day weekend. Because I don't care what anybody says. Going to a football game is a lot of work. We do it because we love it, but it's a lot of work. And so once that Thursday game gets going through and once it ends, I think most people will be like, I love that. Because now you get some, because what I would do if I was, a person that could make it work, but I would make it to where Thursday, I get done with work Thursday, go to the game, but I take off Friday. And so that way you get Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, all back to back to back. So my point is like the Thursday night game is actually a really cool thing. I think it's awesome. I think it's a positive. I don't think it's a slap in the face or an insult to anybody, as some people want to make it. But I think people are going to really see how much they enjoy it once the game gets going, once it comes to an end. All right. We'll talk about another great thing being a certain amount of days away in a second. So stay with us here on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. All right, folks, here on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast, I want to let you know that, of course, we are brought to you by the Gametime app, okay? The Gametime app. Here's the thing. There's a lot of games that are going to be coming up here very quickly, especially in college football, and Razorback football being one of them. So what you do is you need to maybe go to that game in Little Rock, or maybe you're trying to go to the Oklahoma State game. Well, what you need to do is you need to go to the Gametime app and get your tickets, because you have to have a ticket. You have to have a ticket into these games. It's just a fact. So download the Gametime app and check out any of the games that you're going to be looking forward to this college football season and get ahead of the game, get ahead of the curve, and be doing it with the best ticketing app there is. With Gametime Picks, curation makes it easier to save on sports and concerts and comedies and shows, because they do it for everything, folks. They do it for everything. They also have all-in pricing, where you can toggle this feature that shows the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. All right. You can also get a panoramic view of the seat you're about to buy right there in the picture. So you get to see what your view is going to look like, how it's going to look, and if those are going to be good enough seats for you and the wife. And they also have the lowest price guarantee, because if you find something cheaper, Gametime is going to credit you 110% of the difference. It's that simple. So download the Gametime app today and create an account using code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, so final segment here on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast, and I can see by my graphic over there, I did not change the number. And so you're just going to have to pretend it's right because you're not 7 days away. You are 6 days away. I think it was right in the first page, but I guess it just didn't change over, but that's okay. It happens. Just pretend. 6 days away. 6 days away. And I've been doing this where talking about certain players that always remind me. Yesterday I did Niles Davis. Keep wanting to say Niles Davis. I think everyone kept having a problem saying Niles Davis because of Miles Davis, but either way. But number 6 is an interesting number too, because there are a few players that come to my mind, and some of them may be legit. Some of them may be guys that were pretty solid, and other ones will be like, oh yeah, that guy. I remember that guy. So there's one player to me that stands out that was like elite level number 6, and that was Ken Hamlin. Ken Hamlin, one of the best hard-hitting safeties that Arkansas ever had. Had a long career in the NFL, was a Pro Bowler, played with Seattle, played with Dallas. Dude was really, really good. A really good player. And so I think of number 6. He's kind of the one I immediately think of first and foremost. But after that, there's still a few other players of note. And again, stay with me because some of these may be like, again, deep cuts. Y'all remember Randy Kelly? Another safety for Arkansas. Had the big dreads. He was on the 2016 team where he had a scoop and score against Alabama where John Parker Wilson fumbled it and he scampered into the end zone for a touchdown. I think of him. I think of another number 6 who had dreads and I thought was the coolest looking dude. We had his black visor too. But unfortunately, he left the team in the middle of the year. Carlos Ousley, if y'all need to remember him for something, when Arkansas and Texas played each other in 2004 on September 11th, when Arkansas lost that game by 2 points, he was responsible for the wide receiver pass where Matt Jones threw it to him, and then he tossed a beautiful ball downfield, hit to Corey Birmingham for a touchdown. So he's one of the ones that pop into my mind. Kendrick Edwards, he's a random wide receiver who was number 6. He pops into my mind. I want to say TJ Hammonds was number 6. Again, I could be wrong about that one, but I think TJ Hammonds was number 6. He's another one that kind of pops up. So, yeah, number 6 is really fascinating because I feel like once you get into 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, there's going to be plenty of players to choose from with those numbers, at least really big ones and ones of note. But number 6, if I take one, give me Ken Hamlin. That's a good safety number, apparently. Him and Randy Kelly. Randy Kelly was very underrated. Very underrated. I think if you haven't learned much about him or know about him, go look it up. But still, 6 days away. Isn't it great to say? Isn't it great to think? Is for me. But appreciate everybody listening in and watching into the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or on Google Play. You can also get after me on Twitter at John Neighbors Show for any questions, comments, concerns that you may have. We'll keep it going from there. Same podcast time, same podcast channel next Monday. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll see you then.